Welcome back to the Bernard Lee Poker Show. I am absolutely thrilled with regards to this interview. This is a person who is legendary, and if anyone is thankful for where we are today in the world of poker, this is one of those people that we all must thank. He is a Hall of Famer. And he is really, truly the person who started the whole World Series of Poker. I am so thrilled to have on our show Jack Binion. Jack, thank you so much for joining us here on the Bernard Lee Poker Show.
It's my pleasure, Bernard.
Jack, you have really seen it all. Your father obviously starting the Horseshoe downtown, Benny Binion, but you were there hosting the first World Series of Poker. Are you absolutely amazed that it is the 50th anniversary this year?
Not only that, I'm amazed how big poker got.
It is really amazing to see it from the time when Johnny Moss was playing in a game where they voted him champion all the way up to last year when John Sin wins $8-9 million and thousands of players are playing. Can you take us back to 1970, the first time you brought all of these players together? What was kind of the thought process of why you brought the first World Series of Poker together?
Money. No, I tell you what, we were going to open a poker room. So we wanted to kick it off. And so we had been to Reno where it was called a gambler's convention, but it was just a poker game. In fact, that's where I met Doyle Brunson, my best friend. And so the next year we said, well, let's try this out. And I called them and they said, no, we're not going to do it again. It didn't work out as well as we'd like. So we said, okay. And so we put it together and it was, like you say, all kind of, anybody could show up, but it was almost all invites because we didn't really get any publicity out of it. And nobody had ever heard anything like this anyway. And the idea of having a poker tournament or freeze out just didn't cross our mind. So the first time we said, okay, well, we'll make it where we'll just ask and see who people feel like is the best voting. And when I say that, we didn't take ballots. I just went around and asked everybody, and they agreed. And it was small enough. Hell, there probably wasn't 100 guys there.
Right.
So anyway, about a year or two later, actually Amarillo Slim came up with the idea of a freeze out.
Uh-huh.
And freeze outs had been, weren't real popular, but there's always been a heads up freeze out, like, guy sits down and challenges a guy to play a freeze out. And we decided on a multiple freeze out format. And it was really an afterthought. Only 6 people joined the freeze out.
Right.
And nobody wanted to get any publicity. We weren't even thinking about publicity at the time. And Slim won it, and it went from there.
Yeah, it's incredible. The first year, Johnny Moss, who obviously was voted the best player there, but Amarillo Slim, Sailor Roberts, Doyle Brunson, Puggy Pearson, Crandall Addington, Carl Canyon. I mean, boy, what a list of players right there. And then, like you said, the following year they did those freeze outs. You had 7-card stud, Raz, 5-card stud, ace to 5, draw, and no limit hold'em. I've talked with Doyle about it, and he had said that when they were trying to decide on what the main event should be, that they were deciding between no limit hold'em and then also deuce to 7, no limit single draw. Do you remember those discussions, or was it decided upon by the players?
I don't remember exactly, yeah, but I'm going to tell you what.
Yeah.
Just between me and you, Hold'em was kind of losing its popularity a little bit.
Yeah, at the time.
Now,
yeah.
It's so well established that Hold'em will always be the game.
Right.
So anyway, we just had the thing, and everybody got together and played. And like you say, it was small, and we didn't really get any publicity. A lot of people back home did not want the publicity of winning or playing in the poker tournament. So, they were in illegal games, and they didn't want people to realize that they were as good a players as they were and everything, and didn't want any police attention or anybody else. So, but as time goes on, it grew. In fact, the first publicity we ever got was just by accident. 2 reporters from the Cleveland Plain Dealer came out and did an article on a Sunday supplement magazine, and that's how all the publicity started.
Amarillo Slim also went on Johnny Carson and got a lot of press publicity for you guys too.
Yeah,
right?
And I might tell you what, Slim really was the perfect guy for it, because he, just between me and you, he was an extrovert, and he was corny,
right?
And all that corny stuff worked like a charm,
right?
People thought of it. Just the name Amarillo Slim, was a great moniker for a poker player. So he was the perfect guy to win the first one, to tell you the truth.
And he was really the first kind of poker superstar, if you think about it, having him on Johnny Carson, wearing the hat and everything, and winning the first $10,000 buy-in. The previous year was only $5,000. The first $10,000 buy-in. That, back in 1972, was a lot of money.
Well, I'm going to tell you what. If you really think about it, everything is 10 times higher now than it was in 72.
Right.
In other words, you could buy a top-of-the-line car for $3,200. Mm-hmm. I remember my wife, I bought her a Ford 500, Fairlane 500 for $3,200.
Right.
But now it would cost you 40 some odd thousand, and everything else. Like, you could buy a house for houses have gone up probably 25 times.
Right.
But when you really think about it, everything else has really gone up 10 times. So a guy buying in 10,000 is like buying in 100,000.
Exactly. It's incredible. I mean, obviously, only 8 players played back then with Amarillo Slim, but it slowly started picking up. Every year it went up slowly but surely. Doyle winning back-to-back years with 10 deuce, obviously a nice little discussion point, etc. How was that time when Doyle is winning both and his legend starts growing?
Well, at the time, between me and you, Doyle was the best player.
Mm-hmm.
Doyle is the only guy that I ever saw that could sit down and break up a poker game because people didn't want to face it. And I've never seen anybody else, and there's a lot of good players. I've never seen anybody else able to break up a poker game.
Yeah.
So he was a good player, and anyway, and the 10 deuce obviously wasn't a hand that he would have played. It just kind of backed into it.
Sure.
I don't know. I can't remember just how the hand came up. But it was like, they just did kind of the minimum, and Doyle got in there, and the hand turned out to be a big hand. So, but anyway, that's what happened.
Well, what's amazing is Doyle still, through all these years, 85 years young, and he's still playing with the youngsters and doing incredibly well. It really just shows you his proficiency in poker. Right.
Well, and I might tell you the truth. A lot of those guys got like Doyle and Hug really too, and Saylor, and probably the best player really was Chip Reese.
Mm-hmm.
They weren't really good tournament players. They hadn't figured out the tournament strategy yet. And so they never were really good tournament players like they have now. I mean, here, Hellmuth is a tournament specialist.
Right.
Most of these young guys are. And what it really boils down to, for a way to compare it, a ring game is like playing match play golf against medal play golf.
Yeah, that's a very
more.
Right. It's a very interesting way of looking at it.
Yeah, you have because every stroke means something throughout the tournament. Where in match play, you lose a hand, you just buy in again, and it's a whole new game. So in match play, you have 18 contests, you might say, where in a poker tournament and medal play, you have really a 72 hole, and every stroke means one's count. So it is a different strategy and philosophy.
Sure. And at the time, in today's world, because of television and everything, tournaments are looked upon as kind of the holy grail, but back then it really wasn't. I remember I've talked with Doyle and Billy Baxter and Mike Sexton, and really it seemed like you were getting this tournament together so that all the players would come in and then they would play cash on the side. And there were a lot of players that said that they skipped the tournaments because the cash games were so good, right?
Yeah, so here, the tournaments, I like the tournaments because people could identify with it, and it got a lot of publicity. But like I say, a lot of people, especially at first, they wouldn't play in the tournament. They said, "I don't want my game back home to know that I can play this well, and then I'm playing out here with other professional players and everything." And they didn't want to bring their they were in areas that were illegal and everything. People don't realize in the last 50 years how much more liberal people have got to thinking about gambling.
Sure.
And 50 years ago, gambling had a stigma to it. Now, a kid going to college, he says, "I want to be a professional poker player." He's looked upon and admired.
Right. They think it's a cool thing. I mean, I still remember when I was in college 30 years ago, it was a backroom thing. I remember coming to work and telling people, "Oh, I had my home game last night," and people were like, "Don't say anything out loud. The boss doesn't like that." They don't look at it nowadays. They're like, "Oh, where's the game? Let me play." That kind of thing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it has changed.
We are talking with the legendary Jack Binion, of course, Poker Hall of Famer and creator of the WSOP at the downtown Horseshoe. Talk about when the second decade of the World Series started, there was the kid. For those people who don't know him, and so many people say that he could have possibly been the best tournament player ever, and maybe even a better backgammon and gin player. We're talking about Stu Ungar. Talk a little bit about your recollections of Stu.
Stu Ungar, he wasn't the best backgammon player.
Well,
but I'm going to tell you what he was.
Yeah.
There's never been anybody dominate a game like Stewie did gin.
Yeah.
Stewie was so much ahead of everybody else. It's just amazing. When it came to gin, they couldn't cheat him. They couldn't do anything. He was just so good. And I don't know if maybe your audience and you don't know, because gin's kind of not as popular now as it once was. I mean, years ago, you went to any country club or anywhere.
Right.
People, the whole room was playing gin.
Right.
Now, gin isn't that strong, and Stewie just dominated it so much stronger than anything else. And he was a good poker player. The only problem with Stewie is he would get mad if he didn't win, and he would go on tilt pretty easy.
Sure.
So he never was. But like in the poker tournament, and Stewie obviously, as everybody knows, had a lot of personal problems at the end and everything, which had a big effect on him. But Stewie was really smart. And I'm going to tell you what, by the time Stewie was maybe 12 years old, and I'm really kind of, because I didn't meet him until he was about 21, 22, he was already the best gin player in the world. And they would take him around in New York and these places, and here he would be facing up. And as you know, Stewie never weighed over 110 pounds.
Right.
So, and he didn't have any facial hair. So when he came out here, and he was 21, he seriously looked like a kid about 12 years old.
Right.
And I've always thought it would be like going to a dog fight, and here's a big pit bulldog, and you said, well, here, I got a Chihuahua that's going to jump on him, and the Chihuahua would tear him up. So that was Stewie when it came to gin. And poker, he was real good, but I don't know if he would have been. He never was going to be known as good a poker player as a gin player because of his. He was so wild. And all that.
There's a mythical story of where he was playing poker, but next to him, two players were playing gin. And while he was playing poker, he was looking over his shoulder and watching these guys play gin. And he was so disgusted on how badly they were playing that he said to the guy, geez, don't you know he has blah, 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 blah. Play that and then you'll win. And the person looked at him just like, what are you talking about? And it was exactly right. And you know, he's not even playing the gin game.
I'll tell you what. Here's what he could do. And if people play gin, they know what I'm talking about. What you're trying to do is determine what the other player has in his hand. Stewie, in 7 discards, could tell almost exactly what your hand was.
Right.
Now, how he did it, I don't know. Nobody ever knew.
Yeah.
But he was just so much further ahead of in the gin than any place, than everybody else. It was unbelievable.
Right.
So
Mike Sexton comes and does some talks for me when I bring in some people,
right.
And he was talking about a story that he had with Stewie, and Stewie had put a number value on every single card. So over the Ace of Spades was 1, and the King of Clubs was 52, and the person said, Stewie said, if you turn over 1 card at a time, slowly but surely, I will be able to tell you what every single card was. And because he added all of them up and he put all the numbers all the way through, he was going to be able to determine what card it was, because then he added it all up and then he just subtracted it from the total, which was, I think it was 1378. And then he would be able to say, it's the 9 of hearts or whatever it was. And the person was just stunned. And that's what they said. Stewie had such an incredible memory with what he was able to do, right?
Well, I'm going to tell you what about Stewie. His mother was on the phone for bookmakers, and Stewie was raised by her, and he'd be in and she was a big gin player. So Stewie, from the time he was really, really small, and obviously a real bright kid, just grew up with gin. So it's almost like learning to walk. Everybody else learning to walk when they're 15 years old or something. I think Stewie learned at 5 or 6 or something. So he was a really, really good gin player.
Yeah, no, absolutely. He is so legendary with regards to that. Shortly thereafter, after Stewie's time, you had 2 really good stories at the Horseshoe. One, the legendary story of Chip in a Chair with Jack Strauss, of having the chip underneath the napkin. And then, of course, Tom McAvoy and Rod Peete both winning their seat via a satellite, and both of them now heads up for the championship. First, let's talk about the Chip and Chair. Were you...
Oh, okay. Actually, Jack was the one with the chip in the chair.
Right. Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
And I tell you who he was actually playing was Dewey Tomko.
Uh-huh. And
so it's a little.
So talk a little bit.
Yes.
Talk a little bit about that specific scenario of Jack and that moment. Were you present when it happened?
I think I was. It's been so long. It's just like you want to talk about Hellmuth and Chan. I can't. By then, I can't remember any significant hands or any significant factors in that game. Now, you got to remember, I watched a lot of poker in my life and played a lot. But it didn't stand out to me. But yes, anyway, he had a chip left, and from that he took that chip and ran it all the way back up to win the tournament.
And the thing interesting,
and Jack was a good gin player and a really a good poker player. And a great personality.
They talked about it that he said he was all in, but in today's world, verbal binding, etc. I wonder if he said it or if he just pushed all his chips in and didn't realize that it was underneath the napkin.
No, he didn't say it.
Yeah.
And then I might say another thing.
Yeah.
By saying, here's what has happened. Now everybody's got so many chips in front of them that it's not practical to make them put it in the pot. But in those days, you had to put the money in the pot. You didn't put the money in the pot, you didn't, it didn't go. So
right.
When they say that a guy taps you out, you gotta put all the money that you. If Dewey would have put in more money than Jack would have had to give. He has to put all of his money in.
Of course, right.
Hold out on it.
Right.
So he went in. It appeared that he went all in, and he. Like you say, the rest is history.
Sure.
But now it's since so many chips, you can just imagine that as often as people go all in now, bringing all those chips back in, it would go so slow that it would be, it's not practical.
Right. I interviewed Eric Drake a while back about his idea of creating the satellite. And do you feel like that was very instrumental for increasing the number? Because from Stewie to Jack Strauss, it went from 75 to 104, and now suddenly with triple digits, it starts getting bigger and bigger. And obviously, after Tom wins with a satellite, it goes up again.
Well, here's the thing.
Yep.
Eric was definitely came up with the satellite. Eric, very, very smart guy, and as you know, he worked in the poker tournament, ran the poker tournament for years, and did a great job. And I was talking about Jack Strauss's personality. I think maybe Eric has the best personality of anybody I ever met in my life.
Oh, wow, interesting. Why do you say that?
Yes, he's so likable.
Uh-huh.
And he's just. I can't put my finger on it. Otherwise, I'd probably try to copy it.
Yeah, that's funny.
But he just has it. Well, one thing he did, too, when he was talking to somebody, number one, everybody was the same. If he was talking to a bum asking for $2 and Bill Gates walked in, Eric would still concentrate on that $2 guy asking for $2 till he was through with him. So he was always very, very considerate.
Yep.
And that's one of the things he did. But he was funny. I mean, he was a good guy. So I have a lot of admiration for Eric's personality and Eric himself. Now, Eric used to joke, and it's the truth. He says, I was the seventh best 7-card stud player in the world. Unfortunately, I played with the sixth best poker players. So, but that's what. He could, and like I say, Strauss had a great personality.
Yeah.
Chip Reese had a great personality.
Right.
And now all of these guys have good personalities because they're dealing with the public and they're dealing with other poker players that they're basically trying to beat. So it pays to be nice. But these guys had all the elements of good personality.
Let's talk about, it's amazing that we talked about that it's 50 years for the World Series, but it has been 30 years since a gentleman by the name of Phil Hellmuth won his bracelet, the first bracelet of his career, 1989 World Series main event. Johnny Chan was going in for his third third main event win. What an unbelievable time this was, because before we get to that 1989 one, Johnny wins back-to-back years, and I know that I've talked with Mike Sexton, and Mike said that you couldn't have been bigger than Johnny Chan was in 1988 and 1989. Do you remember that as well?
Oh yeah, I'm gonna tell you what. Johnny Chan, even today, is a great poker player. He's not recognized as much as he should be. What a good poker player he is. Johnny. Okay, like the last, I don't know how many years, he playing over there in Macau. There's no telling how much money he's made. And but Johnny is a very good poker player. He's you might say, I won't say just which one he is, but he's in the very top echelon of good poker players ever.
So going into 1989, Johnny and Phil both make the final table, and the buzz is truly about Johnny becoming the first back-to-back champion. Johnny Moss had won 3. He won in 70, 71, and 74. And of course, we'd had some other back-to-back winners like Stu Ungar and Doyle Brunson. But no one had won 3 in a row. And Johnny had now just made that final table. Take me back in your recollection how unbelievable that setting was, especially
well, it actually, I don't know just how unbelievable it was. What was, you might say, unbelievable is Phil was just a college kid.
Yeah.
Although when I say he was a college kid, I think he was about 24 at the time or something.
Yeah.
And his father actually came out, not that his father came out to bring his kid out there, but when he did well, his father actually came out to watch the poker game. I can remember that. So nobody expected some, and I shouldn't call him a college kid because I think, like I say, he'd already been out of school. But in everybody's mind, he's just a college kid,
right?
And he won the tournament. So, and as it turned out, he of all the people that changed their lives, it really changed the direction of Phil's life.
Sure, 100%. And do you back then, was it, I don't want to say looked down upon, but in today's world, because all these young kids can play online and play millions of hands and do all these solvers and everything, they look upon young kids as being the players who can win it. But back then in the late 1980s and early 1990s, am I correct that the young players were actually looked down upon because, well, they don't have enough experience?
I wouldn't say looked down upon, but they okay, because Stewie was a real young
Sure. Absolutely, right.
But he was a phenomenon.
Right.
I tell you what else. I kind of do believe that one thing you can't do, you cannot compare one era of sports, politics, poker, anything, right, one era to another, because it's just different, and it's just not apples to apples. And so, but yeah, the guy had the experience, and even now, people play and they watch all these games and everything. It's like playing online. It's more like a computer where even now it's a big plus.
Sure.
To play a lot of hands, but you still have to be able to play the player,
right,
and understand his weaknesses and strengths, and and play to that. You know what I mean? So
right.
It's still a big item. But Phil was the first guy, you might say, that really understood the difference between regular ring game poker and tournament poker.
Interesting. Yeah.
Yes.
And do you, when you were there, you were asked to, were you watching the entire final table? I know you came up when it came heads up and you were standing right there.
I can't, like I told you, Bernard, I can't even remember
yeah.
exactly what the situation was.
Yeah.
But, I usually was around for the poker tournament,
Sure.
It was interesting if nothing else. But I can't remember. I cannot really remember the exact sequence of events on when Phil won the tournament.
So when to recall the hand, Phil had nines, Johnny had ace seven. It kind of ran out king 10, king jack, and then a queen, and then a six. Back then, not specifically the hand itself, but when Phil won, were you surprised, or were you not surprised? Because, like you said,
no. I was surprised.
Okay.
Here's.
Yeah.
It was almost like, well, this kid got lucky.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it really wasn't that way, because Phil, and I don't know, maybe I'm giving him more credit than I should, but he understood the long-range strategy of tournament play better than anybody else at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And even today, he's a much better tournament player than he is a ring game player.
Right. Absolutely. And like you said, you were surprised, but after watching him play, you recognized that he had that tournament ability. And did you see a bright future for him, or could you never have seen him being the all-time?
No, I didn't recognize that there would be that. There was only one poker tournament.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So he had to play. He could play once a year, and everybody else was playing every day of the year, because there wasn't any poker tournaments beside that at the time.
Sure.
I tell you what really helped poker. Obviously, World Series reinvigorated poker, because poker, it wasn't a dying game, but it wasn't growing at all. It was basically shrinking. Was the camera and the internet poker phenomenon.
Right.
Made all the difference in the world.
Right.
Because the camera, in fact, I'm sure you talked to Phil, to Mike Sexton.
Yep.
He told the people that he was working with, buy every ad that you can on this tournament. And so they bought up all the ads, and the tournament, whatever, I can't even remember what it was or anything, but they played like a Friday, Saturday, Sunday. They couldn't handle all the entry. There was so much demand for party poker.
Right.
They couldn't handle the all the people that wanted to sign up.
Right.
And it made all the difference in the world. I mean, here it made poker. That's really what made poker an overnight phenomenon.
So let's jump all the way to that. Was it absolutely crazy? Obviously, Chris Moneymaker winning, but really the year that was absolutely nuts for the Horseshoe was when Greg Raymer won, because the numbers tripled. I know I've talked to Matt Savage about it. I've talked to Greg Raymer about it with regards to that. There were tables everywhere within slot machines, etc., and even the fire marshals threatened to close the whole place down, right?
Well, no, that's not true. But yeah, okay. Poker then, the internet was started.
Right.
The internet made a lot of difference in the popularity of poker, because everybody started playing online. It was easy. They didn't have to go find a game. It was right there. It was fun. I mean, like I say, the camera and the internet and the internet poker made all the difference in the world. That's when it really cut off. Like you say, we had that poker tournament for 20 years, and every year it would grow. It really wasn't going anywhere. When I say that, it wasn't really anything that was really. If those two events hadn't come, we'd have a poker tournament, but you wouldn't be talking to me.
Right. It would just be. It was just a nice, steady growth, but nothing fantastic, nothing exponential, nothing exponential.
It was just, no. In other words, this thing, and Mike, and I might be totally wrong about the number, but they got like 50,000 signups in one weekend.
Yeah.
And it was nothing like it. Now, a lot of people played poker. Poker, even at its worst, was probably as popular as golf was at the time. But everybody played around the kitchen table. It wasn't an event, and so it was a totally different situation.
Sure, absolutely.
But then when they got all this stuff, people got a lot of publicity. They saw what a good game it was. Poker is actually a great spectator sport, and all that by getting it on TV and having the camera. Now we used to have TV, but we didn't have the camera. I didn't think that the poker players would let you look at their hole guards, and so I didn't do it. But it used to be on ABC, but it wasn't worth a damn because the viewer couldn't play along with the player, so it didn't mean that much. And now they did the perfect thing with the camera, and the person can watch the game, and it really made it interesting.
Sure.
But all that made this thing explode. Everybody likes to think, well, so and so did. It was those two things were really what made poker.
Right. Absolutely. We're talking with the legendary
the popularity of poker.
Right. We're talking with the legendary Jack Binion, of course, creator of the WSOP and ran the Horseshoe downtown for so many years. Before we get to the transition away, a couple other events that I thought were just fantastic during the time at Horseshoe. One was Stu Ungar's return. And this was the time where you had the final table outside. What was the thought process of doing that?
I can't remember now, except that, we had it outside. Okay, number one, there was so many people wanted to watch it. So we said, well, and if it was, let's face it, if it rained or if it had been blowing real hard or something, we'd have had to have it inside.
Right.
But we had it outside where more people could watch and everything. And that's what it was. It wasn't any great idea of mine or anything that made it. So.
Well, incredible victory, obviously, by Stewie to come back after all those years and win in '97. But then the following year, unfortunately, he didn't play, and eventually he passed that year. But that was the year of Scotty, and the phrase that has lived for all these years: "If you're gonna call, it's all over, baby." What was your thought process of Scotty when he won, and your kind of opinion of all of that?
Well, it was Scotty was a good poker player.
Absolutely.
In other words, this wasn't an accident that he won that poker tournament.
Right.
We, especially early on, we had one or two what I would call accidents because, like, it's just going back to golf. Jack Nicklaus didn't win every tournament.
Right.
Because of circumstances. It just doesn't work that way. So, but the guy has to be a good poker player. It isn't an accident. but anyway, that's the difference.
Yeah. What about this year? Incredible. Jim Bechtel, the 1993 World Series main event champion, 26 years in between him winning a bracelet to this year where he won the 10K deuce to 7. How incredible of a story is that?
I don't know if it's really that incredible, because I'm going to tell you what.
Yeah.
Poker, you have a long life with poker. In other words, a guy, here, what is a poker player? He's actually a mental athlete. So, but well, I've kind of watched it. A poker player from the time he's very young until most poker players start slipping when they get 60. Being 60 is like a guy that's now 36, 37 playing basketball. They're okay. As you get older, obviously you don't. You're not as alert. Your mind doesn't work as quick, and everything. So just like a basketball player, you lose a half step and you can't keep up. And this is why Doyle is so phenomenon, because he is like a guy 50 years old still playing in the NBA.
Right. It's amazing.
So that's the difference.
Right.
Yes.
Absolutely.
And just like a guy 50, he doesn't play like he once did, obviously, and he'll be the first one to tell you that he doesn't play near as good as he once did. But he's so good that he can still play. Now, he never was a good tournament player. But here and today, when you got thousands of people playing in the tournament, you can't play like those guys used to.
Right.
Doyle could, I don't think, or Chip B too. They were like the two best poker players I ever saw. And I've known a lot of good poker players.
Right.
But they never were really good tournament players. Number one, they never concentrated on it. If they would have concentrated on it, they would have become good tournament players. But they didn't have to, and it wasn't as much fun for them, so they didn't do it.
And do you feel like Phil is one of those top tournament players, maybe one of the best tournament players ever?
Well, you tell a hunter by his hides. In other words, he's won. When I say tell a hunter by his hides, in other words, he's come home with a lot of he's got a lot of hunting trophies.
Yep, right.
And if you're not a good hunter, you're not going to come home with those trophies. So the same thing.
Sure. So I was going to ask you, and you can determine it whichever way you want, whether it's cash or tournaments or just overall general poker players.
Right.
What would your Mount Rushmore of poker be? Those 4 people that would be up there. And it could be for any reason, whether playing or industry or whatever it would be. Who would your 4 be?
I couldn't say, because
it's tough.
I haven't been around. I couldn't say because I have not been around the young players, so I'm not the best guy to do it. But a guy like Phil, Daniel Negreanu, and some of these guys would definitely be up there on Mount Rushmore.
Sure.
And I do think that there is not that much difference between the real good old players and the real good new players. Mm-hmm. Now, if you ask anybody, it's like, well, those old players couldn't play. They wouldn't. They weren't as good as they are now. They were as good.
Yeah.
But like I say, you can't compare one era to another because the game's changed.
Sure.
The formats have changed. You just can't compare the two.
The final question I have for you is, what kind of, how sad or was it a relief after the World Series of Poker brand was sold to Harrah's and kind of moved down to the Rio?
No, I hadn't been there. Okay, I sold out to my sister.
Sure. Yep.
And I didn't have any place to take the World Series. Otherwise, I would have probably tried to take it with me because she didn't really care about it that much at the time.
Right.
And so, and poker wasn't the phenomenon it is now. This was in '98. Right. Poker hadn't still really exploded yet.
Right.
It was getting more popular, but yes. If I had it to do over again. Yeah, but nobody, and when I say nobody could see the phenomenal success and growth poker has had.
Right, right. In today's world, you afterward you did some work for Wynn International, including opening up Wynn in Macau. Do you still do some work for Wynn and on a consulting basis?
No. I wanted to try to get a license in Macau because Macau is another planet.
Yeah.
It's just another planet.
Yeah.
And so I went over there and I helped Steve, but immediately I could see that I was a fish out of water. Because Steve does a good job, but I have my way, and Steve and we always get along. We're still real good friends and everything. But I stayed over there 5 months and I haven't done anything since in the way of casino management.
Right. Jack, it has been an absolute pleasure and my honor having you on our show. We have had some legends, but you are definitely up there, and you would be on my Mount Rushmore, sir. And I really appreciate you spending the time and the.
Well, actually, it lasted a lot longer than I expected. You got me talking. But, so you're probably going to have to edit it some even. But anyway, thank you for calling.
No, Jack, thanks so much. Really appreciate it. And it was fantastic. I'm not going to edit it at all. It was a great interview and we really loved it. And thanks so much again.
Okay.